In the right place. So we are live now on Facebook. So thank you everyone for joining me. I'm really excited to have Erin with us today. This is more from a selfish point of view as a parent. I think she's going to have a lot of insights and a lot of exciting things to share. So welcome to the interview, Erin. The Parental CEO was created to help parents become successful both in business and in parenting. We always want to add value to our community by sharing either success stories or advice on how to kind of manage the best of both worlds. Mm-hmm. So, Erin, give us a brief introduction about yourself.
Sure. So I live in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. I'm a mom of 3, and I am working as a coach. I spend a lot of my time doing parent coaching, and I'm also unschooling my kids. So I offer unschooling for beginners classes also. And I think because my own personal philosophy is really based in self-directed living and nonviolent communication, I really take an approach that focuses on principles and values, not so much rules. And so it's really neat to see how that can play out in parenting, in education, and it works so well for entrepreneurs, because I think a lot of us get used to, yeah, that's a rule, but why is that a rule? And okay, if that's the reason for the rule, but this way would also be possible, I'm going to talk to the powers that be and see if there's this possibility or this potential strategy. So I think when I'm sharing, a lot of people relate to the things that I'm sharing, either on the parental level, looking through it through an educational lens, and then yes, it also really applies to entrepreneurs and life and organizations. Whenever people are interacting, this is the stuff that seems to matter.
Amazing.
Definitely, that is fantastic.
For those that don't know, could you just give like a quick overview of what is unschooling?
Oh yeah, I always forget that a lot of
people don't know what that
is. I forget about that. So I use the term unschooling, but I don't actually necessarily really feel like it accurately describes what my family does. Before being a parenting coach, I spent time like the blink of an eye doing consulting work, organizational behavior consulting work. So it was looking at how do folks learn within organizations and groups of adults learn. And then I went to teachers college and I did some, I really focused, I guess, on the younger years and how do children learn. And I thought, wow, we have a really different idea, or at least we're being taught as teachers, a really different idea about what is learning for young children. And my daughter's just asking me to help her dress her doll. So I don't think I can do this right now. It's a little tricky for me. So as I started to understand, okay, well, this adult idea of how people learn doesn't really match up with the school way of how people learn, or at least we have a lot of controls that we put on kids in school. And I started to feel really curious, like what else is possible? And when I had my own children, I really started to dive deeply into like what other possibilities are there. And when I came across self-directed education, both in terms of learning in a community, perhaps in a school or a learning center, including learning at home, unschooling, I thought, well, this really makes sense for me because of my previous work and previous education about how human beings learn, how adults learn. So for me, unschooling represents following your interests and going through the full learning cycle. So that means, being inspired, struggling with something, working through something that might be really difficult, and then coming out at the other end and feeling this real sense of pride because, this was internal motivation that brought you here and brought you through the difficult navigating steps that you've accomplished. So it's also really consent-based. It means that sometimes my kids might ask to have formal lessons, and I'm totally cool with that. It might mean sometimes we use a curriculum. Really, my kids have not been that interested in using curriculum, so we really haven't done much of that, but we're open to it. It's really just, to me, it really fits with entrepreneurs. I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably naturally do this themselves. What are you inspired to be doing? Pursuing that, bringing in other resources where it makes sense, and, persevering according to your own body and your own needs. So for me, unschooling and an entrepreneurial lifestyle really fit. And it fits not just like it's the same philosophy to me, but it also fits because we can do learning whenever we want. I kind of fit in work when it makes sense. We fit in learning when it makes sense. And we're learning all the time. So it's just, it's just living. It feels like we're just living life. Mm-hmm. That was a long answer.
I heard a definition the other day that's defined unschooling as self-determination and intrinsic motivation.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's the basis of it. So that totally sounds like in alignment with what you're talking about. And you're right. So many entrepreneurs are like, I'm going to do my own thing. And I'm going to make my own path.
Yeah. And Taya, I know that you grew up and you did a lot of unschooling yourself, right?
Yeah, I was unschooled. Well, our first year of homeschooling, I was fully aligned. But after that, we were like, that's not for us. So we unschooled until I graduated from high school.
That's really cool. I love actually meeting other folks who have tried different paths because, I don't know, there's a camaraderie there, of knowing that, hey, we don't have to follow the script that everyone's telling us we need to follow. Yes. We can kind of figure out what works for us.
Yes.
I think one of the worries that I think a lot of people may have with unschooling, and it has been something that's crossed my lips, is about the social interaction. So obviously when Tobias goes to school right now, he's getting that social interaction. Is there anything that you can share that you do to kind of counteract that?
Yeah, I mean, I think how to explain this? So we do a whole week on this within my Unschooling for Beginners class, the whole socialization piece. When you think about all the different ways that someone could be socialized, school, recreational activities, maybe religious institutions, maybe immediate family, maybe extended family, maybe cultural groups, the hobbies that someone may have, the friends that they may have, there's a wide variety of different areas that you could be getting your socialization needs met. And I think for unschoolers, we're not doing the school piece, but we're really investing in all of the other pieces. So, having lots of activities, lots of play dates. One of the things that I really love actually is having time to, when we have our play dates, they're multi-age and they're for a long time. Like we might meet for 3 hours, 4 hours, go to the woods and hang out. And when you have such a long stretch of socializing time, it really gives the kids a time to build these really, really sweet relationships. But then they also get into like real conflicts. So they're learning a lot of those really important socialization skills because, it's not a 15-minute break. It's a 4-hour play session. Mm-hmm. And so there's that. And then like this year is really tough to be doing unschooling. I don't know about you, Taya, but with my family here in Ontario, like right now we're in another stay-at-home order. And it feels like we were just 2 weeks out of our old stay-at-home order. So it feels like it's just been months and months and months of being told that we can't socialize with folks. And as painful as that is, I'm also really, like within my family, I'm totally open to my kids using technology as they wish. I actually don't put any limits on it. And it's been really cool to watch my middle daughter in particular, who is my most social child. She has friendships and they just shifted everything online. So they're playing Roblox together, and they have these little worlds, and they're getting into arguments the same as they might do in person. Well, we didn't celebrate my birthday long enough. I think we should redo my character's birthday over again. And so it's really cool to see that, if you give kids some freedom in exploring technology and using it as they wish, it's really neat to see that they're still picking up those same skills. Now, don't get me wrong, all three of my kids are really missing that in-person long play date socialization, and we've been doing it outdoors as often as the rules are allowing it, but they're missing the indoor stuff. Like, they are missing that this year. So we're looking forward to getting back, doing more community events. Under my company name, We Learn Naturally, I also organized different recreational programs for kids who were aligned with unschooling philosophies. And my kids have been missing that, having that sense of community, a couple mornings a week or a couple afternoons a week, getting together. And we really did like an unschooling style philosophy with it, where the kids would pick something that they want to learn about, and then we'd plan for it. And then the week that it would happen, those who were still interested would take part. A lot of them were like, we're off to something new. But just having that sense of community, I think, is so important. It's one of our needs as human beings. So although it looks different than what it might look like in school, I think it's still really rich, the environment that you can provide. But it takes time to find those relationships and nurture them. So after the pandemic, or maybe not even after the pandemic, who knows how long this will go on, but we're going to be looking for ways to re-engage and build community again.
It's fantastic. I think that's going to alleviate a lot of doubt on people's minds on whether unschooling could be a good choice for their children. I think, there's going to be a lot of entrepreneurs watching this thinking, I'd really like to unschool my children, but, I don't want them to miss out on that social aspect. So I think you've really covered that really well.
Yeah, definitely.
So
I also think that entrepreneurs tend to like an unschooling lifestyle, or even a homeschooling lifestyle, if you feel more comfortable with curriculum, because you can really do the learning anytime. Yeah. So if your work schedule has you working, let's say it has you working a lot of evenings and weekends, and if your kids were in school, you'd be passing ships in the night, you wouldn't see each other. And so choosing a homeschooling or unschooling option, if it works for everybody, if it works for the kids and it works for you, it can be a nice way to still have that family connection, but you don't have to follow like this is the schedule that learning happens. The other thing that we really loved for our family, when we first started unschooling, my husband was traveling a lot for his work, and it was an American company, and so he was a sales manager across Canada, so we got to travel with him all the time and dip into that world schooling kind of lifestyle. So we got to go to neat places, and it's true that he wouldn't get to visit the museums in the cities with us, but I'm pretty comfortable just kind of exploring a new place. I had a really great stroller, and it was a really cool way to learn about our world and be exposed to things. So for folks who have jobs that involve a lot of traveling, if your partner is also entrepreneurial and can work from wherever, and the kids can learn from wherever, there's so much flexibility. It can be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I also think about, like, this morning for me, taking Tobias to school. we had a bit of a meltdown. Yeah. So I imagine within unschooling, it would just be a case of, look, let's deal with that situation. You don't have to be at school at 9 o'clock. Yeah. Let's emotionally connect, figure out what's causing this emotional eruption, rather than quick, let's get you out the door, causing even more anxiety for us as parents, but also for Tobias. So I think the benefits of unschooling can be amazing from the sounds of it.
I think there's something to be said too with unschooling, in that it naturally lends itself to seeing growth opportunities in any situation, not just 9 to 3 when you're at school, but in all of life. that there's opportunities for growth and development, which I think is something that is also innately part of being an entrepreneur, is that we're always just learning and growing and pivoting, and the two blend nicely together in that way.
That's my feeling also. And I mean, yeah, Jamie, I sometimes I look at my friends who are, I still have lots of friends with kids who are in school, and I look at the pace of life and, getting all the lunches ready and getting everyone out the door. And, it's not to say that unschooling is this perfect, Shangri-La. Like there are still things that are really challenging about it. But for me, wow, I would really hate that morning rush. And I lived that morning rush for a short period of time when my youngest, when I was still working as a teacher and taking my youngest for childcare and that sort of thing. And yeah, like you really, sort of what you were saying, Taya, like you really start to tap into your sense of self. So unschooling, because it's internally motivated, internally driven, you really, like the learner is tapping into, what do I feel inspired to do? And when they're kids, it's a lot of playing, and the play is the learning. And I think people are more accepting of that than maybe they had been previously. But even as adults, as the parent, for me, this unschooling journey has resulted in like self-awareness beyond what I could have predicted, and understanding, what are my needs as a parent? How do I advocate for them? And not just as a parent, as a person, and how do I advocate for them? And, that ends up being, in my family, it's ended up being our core learning. And the other stuff is just, okay, yeah, sure, we'll learn about the human skeleton today. That could have been anything, but like the real important stuff to me is like, how do we collaborate? How do we solve problems? How do we move through these big feelings? What do these big feelings even mean?
Yeah.
And, having lots of time to go into that and understand that, in my opinion, is setting them up for success in whatever they want to do.
Definitely in this modern world.
Yeah, being adaptable, right?
Yeah. Well, if COVID's taught us anything, is to be able to adapt and adapt quickly. And it was like Trevor was talking about last week, agilism, and being agile and being nimble and being able to change direction. It's really interesting, because I think the skills that you learn as a child, when you're, this is my opinion, when you're going through a curriculum, I kind of feel like it's almost like it's just too rigid. And I've seen people coming out of university studying like marketing degrees that have, by the time they finish their marketing degree, what they've learned is actually out of date. Yeah. Which is just remarkable, because they can't change the syllabus at such a late time. So it's really, really scary. But obviously, education has to either catch up, or I guess more and more people will be unschooling their children. It's definitely on my radar for something that I want to do. How I'm going to do that, I just don't know yet.
Yeah.
What would you suggest for people that are in that place where Jamie is, where they're like, oh, unschooling, homeschooling kind of looks cool, I don't know if it's for me? Like, how do people navigate that first, I guess, exposure to, is this even the right decision for my family?
Wow, that's a great question. I've never been asked. Let me think for a second. I mean, I think there will come a time when it just feels like the push to do it is so obvious, and that, okay, it's time to just give this a try. If you're going into it feeling like you should do it, I think that will always have a sense of uncomfortableness that will be challenging to navigate. But if you've reached a point where, you know what, the kids are kind of asking for this, I'm kind of asking for this, my partner's thinking this might be a good time to try it, then that's the right time to try it.
Yeah.
You can hear great things about it, and I know that I'm sharing lots of great things about it, but there are challenges too. And so, making the choice fully and recognizing we're just ready for this. We're ready for this change. We're ready to give it a try. I think that's the right time to do it. And the first year, I think, is probably the toughest. It's when every worry you have will be coming to the surface regularly. And everyone will be asking you questions and reminding you of your own worries. Yeah. And it's also usually the time when you don't have your support network established. So maybe you don't have the people to ask questions to, or someone saying, yeah, don't worry, this is totally normal. And even just the socialization piece, what you mentioned, Jamie, like there's so many little pieces. So the first year is probably the toughest, and reaching out. A lot of homeschoolers and unschoolers love Facebook, and I know that you love Facebook too. So, dabbling there first to kind of get a sense of, does this make sense for me? Does this fit? That probably is the first step, and that's before you maybe even make the decision to do it fully.
Yeah, I know in Canada, there's definitely some really good homeschooling and unschooling Facebook groups, as well as for STEM or for the early years or whatever. I think I'm on like 10 different ones.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say that so there's sort of like your personal style of homeschooling, whether it's unschooling, radical unschooling, which I tend to fall under. Not that I think I'm radical. And so there's the type that you do, and then there's like broad geographic areas, so within your country, and then you can get down to like your geographical area. So for example, I'm the admin for my local Burlington, Hamilton unschoolers group, and that is lovely outside of a pandemic, because that's where you kind of find the people that you meet up face to face, but it's also super helpful to have these online communities and online groups that you can ask those questions to. And, everyone within homeschooling and unschooling communities, they're usually pretty helpful and eager to support one another. So it's a safe space to ask those terrifying questions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting, because that's kind of the whole ethos of what we're trying to do with Apprentice CEO, is create that community for parents that are in business to come and share their stories, share their successes, share their wins, ask questions, get insight from other parents about unschooling, about different ways of running businesses, about that flexibility of running a business. Have you got a bricks and mortar business? And I think what you're touching on there is just so in line with what we're trying to do here at the Parental CEO Collective, in the Facebook group, just to create that community.
Yeah, well, it's all about community, right? Like, if community is who we can go to when we're struggling, and those struggling moments, that is part of the learning. And as entrepreneurs, we encounter that more often. As parents, we encounter that more often, because there's a lot to navigate. And then, for folks who are into homeschooling and unschooling, you're also encountering that in like the learning education realm. So yes, we're very much aligned.
Well, I find it sometimes, like, if I was unschooling my children right now in my community, as in my local community, I don't know who I would turn to without looking like I'm crazy, because my parents would be like, what are you talking about, unschooling? What's that?
Yeah.
And then my friends would be like, unschooling? Are you crazy? Like, you're going to homeschool your children? Like, we've done it during the pandemic, and no, we don't want that again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I now find myself really wanting to make a distinction between what everyone was doing during the pandemic and what homeschooling and unschooling is, because I have hated this version of life under the pandemic, and I don't consider it to be unschooling, homeschooling, because it's just me and the kids all the time. We can't get out and explore the world the way we're used to. We're not interacting with friends. The kids' activities have either stopped or they've been touch and go. So But at the same time, I totally understand what you're saying about, the parental piece and the friend piece. When I started to want to do unschooling, I was actually still employed as a teacher. And
I bet that went over well.
And so at first, I just kept it really quiet. Like, I didn't even want to tell anybody what I was doing. And my mom was a teacher, and my dad, it was just like so far from everything every reference they had in life. And so I felt really protective in the beginning about wanting to just kind of practice it quietly so that I could get my own head around, okay, what feels right? What doesn't feel right? I don't think I can handle a question like that right now. How could I respond? And then slowly, I think people started to look at what we were doing and the way we were living. And then, like, I don't know fully if my parents are still 100% on board, but they see what we're valuing as a family. And on some level, they get it now. So I understand your hesitancy. And I think once, like, if you were curious about it, check and see if there's a local homeschooling group, unschooling group, especially in the summer. I think a lot of homeschooling and unschooling groups are totally used to having people who are curious about it come and check out their play dates or whatever and see if, just to talk to people in real life. So
I know when I was a kid, we used to have park days every Wednesday. We'd get lunch, we'd make a lunch, we'd go to the park, and we'd just play there all afternoon until it was like, oh, got to beat rush hour to come home. And that was like a really big piece of not only like building that community, but also learn, like you say, we were exposed to younger kids, older kids, adults, all in that social environment, as well as, so we were getting that social aspect, but we are also kind of like just learning how to be human beings.
Yeah. And I mean, I think because I went to school and I did well in school. But I had, like, even still, I catch myself with schoolish ideas where every once in a while I'll question myself, well, how old is that friend? And I think, well, that's just bizarre. My kids have friends who are older than them, younger than them, and they don't think twice about it. But because I'm so used to myself being categorized by age, I catch myself now and then thinking, oh, they're younger than me, or oh, they're older than me. And like, why is that a thing for me? I don't know.
Yeah.
But it's just my social conditioning, right? To be paying attention to that as though that's a should, or there was some kind of rule or logic there about why we should be separated by age. In fact, I find, having worked with lots of kids in multi-age environments, it's so much easier to have multi-age groups of kids than to have kids divided up by age. When they're divided up by age, they often have the same developmental needs showing up at the same time. So there's a lot more conflict. The needs, like the high needs feeling, the needs are very similar. You'd think it would be easier to meet them because they're similar needs, but I don't find that's the case. When you have multi-age, often older kids are more than willing to help younger kids. Younger kids feel included, and they might rise up beyond what you might think their maturity level would put them at. So there's some benefits definitely to having those multi-age play groups.
Yeah, definitely. So what do you think, just kind of going back to the title of our live here, what would you say are some of the pros and cons of the parent-child dynamic?
Pros and cons
arise here.
Well, I think one of the things that I really appreciate, and I'm hoping this is like a take-home message for parents. So the way that I like to parent or live my life in general is more of a collaborative approach. And within a collaborative approach, it's more about identifying the needs and our feelings are indicating what needs are looking to be met, or maybe already met. And so once you can get to that needs level and you're holding your needs with care, and you've heard and understood, your child's needs with care, then once you're holding on to that tightly, then you can look at all the strategies that might be possible for meeting these needs. And so in terms of like pros and cons with a parent-child relationship, I think the pros are, you don't have to follow the rules. You can really think about what would make sense for us. And you're really encouraging collaboration and creativity, not just for your kids, but for you too. So you're really flexing that muscle yourself. And like I said, entrepreneurs are usually pretty good at using that muscle anyway. I think the downside is that it does, and to me, it doesn't feel like such a downside, but I think if you're new to it, it takes time to slow down. Jamie, I'm picturing you this morning trying to get your son to school and he's having this epic meltdown. And you're probably thinking, part of me would love to slow down and like help meet your needs or understand what your needs are. And then the other part of you is probably thinking, and then we're going to need a late slip to get you into class. Like trying to balance those two things. But if you're first trying to transition over to it, it does take time.
Could you touch on the idea of deschooling?
Yeah, sure. So deschooling is sort of like it's sort of what you're doing to let go of schoolish ideas. So I often think of it as letting go of all the shoulds. Like anytime you're shoulding yourself, it's letting you know that there's a judgment there, exploring what that judgment is, and then really looking at it with openness. Does it make sense for me? Is this actually what I want to value? Is it meeting our needs? So I think deschooling is something that entrepreneurs probably do all the time and just wouldn't use that unschooling term to describe it, but really sort of exploring, is this making sense for me? Do I want to let go of it? Ted, did you want to add to that? Because I know everyone sort of has their own take on it.
Well, I mean, I will admit that I was unschooled. Eventually, I was unschooled as a child, and I have every intention of unschooling my own children. And I always say I am/will be because my kids are very young, but I think unschooling starts the day you pop out. So I think that it even for myself, it can be hard to like get there. I think that deschooling, while there is kind of a recommendation of what deschooling is, I think you're kind of always deschooling / just growing as a parent, as an entrepreneur, as a homeschooling person. So I just like to think of deschooling as a phase of development and then an ongoing as well as ongoing.
I agree with that completely. So people will often say when you're starting unschooling or even homeschooling, a lot of homeschoolers will correct me on my Instagram page and say, we do that too. But they say like, take a good chunk of time, maybe even a year. And within that year, you are really just, letting go of all expectations in that year. How do you want to spend your time? What do you want to do? What brings you joy? What are you curious about? What is your body telling you need right now? And it's really starting to like get really deeply connected with what you might be needing. And for some folks, it takes a year and then they feel like this urge, this inspiration, like, okay, I want to try to do this now. And I wouldn't push anything on a kid until they're like super gung-ho and ready to do it. But usually parents, because we've been existing in this world that says, oh no, your kids should really be doing this, it's really hard to like let go of that noise and just keep focusing on, okay, nope, I see what's going on here and this is valuable too. And now I kind of feel like I talked myself out of my main point. And so maybe I'll stop there.
That's okay. I know that like
more to this, but I forget.
Education is one of those things that as parents, we feel like there must be a right way to do it.
Yeah.
And there's no right, there's no wrong, like it just, and it's going to happen naturally, whether we try and stop it or control it, it's going to happen. A couple of years ago, I asked a family friend, Judy Arnold, to come in and do a parenting course for me and my girlfriends. And one of the things that my computer is about to die. Oh, there we go. I forgot to plug it in. One of the things she said is she was like, as long as you're feeding your kids and housing your kids and not beating them, you're good. Like, other than that, don't stress about things too much, because otherwise you'll like be worried. You'll be spending all your time stressing instead of just being with your kids.
Yeah. And I think as entrepreneurs, we know, like, we've experienced what it feels like to follow that innate learning path ourselves. So really, yes, all you're doing is you're giving your kids opportunities to do that too. And so in a lot of ways, I think it makes total sense to me that like Elon Musk and lots of different entrepreneurs really gravitate to this style of learning, because that's what they do. And like, that's what humans have done before schools existed. And it's what we do outside of school too. I think that it's tricky because, well, for lots of reasons, but a main reason, and this is part of what the pandemic has brought out, is that especially when you're an entrepreneur, you're trying to juggle lots of things. And sometimes school is really great for childcare. And, that's a reality, right? And so I'm really curious to see what might happen, especially if the pandemic extends beyond where we are right now. If we have, a couple of years of this, I wonder what will come next, because the possibilities for what education could be really excite me. I would love for it to feel more like school is more of a resource center, and, when it works for families to access this resource, they do. And, when they're happy doing their own thing, they do. And I'd love to see more flexibility and fluidity. That's my ideal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'd be nice some of that government funding as well to go to parents that want to unschool their children. But I know that's never going to happen, because then they would stipulate that you've got to follow a syllabus. And
yeah, some countries have funding and some countries don't, and some people like that, and some people are like, just leave me alone, let me do my thing.
Yeah, it really is a country by country basis. And then even within countries, like provinces or states, they have their own way of doing things and valuing things. Like, for example, Taya, you're in Alberta, and you have some very loose rules that Judy Arnold has helped to get funding in exchange for these loose rules.
Yes.
And here in Ontario, we have nothing. And like you said, some parents are like, leave us alone. We won't take your money because we don't want the strings attached. And then other people are like, well, I'm curious, what are those strings? Maybe I'd be willing. So it's a really, it's a hot topic amongst homeschoolers. What would we be willing to do, and are we willing? And I'm really curious to see how it plays out, not just in my province and in my country, but around the world. I think people are thinking differently about education right now because of the pandemic and what they saw and what they experienced.
The pandemic has been a good opportunity for us to reevaluate the rules and the boxes that we put ourselves in like every level of life.
I agree. Yeah. And like, what a gift. And it hasn't always been a comfortable gift. And I recognize that I'm saying what a gift, and I have lots of privilege to be able to say that. But I'm really hoping that, collectively we can look around and notice who was really struggling here. I'd like to be in a world where we value more needs and value more people. And so I'm really hoping that it's an opportunity to make some changes that work for more people. That's my wish.
As kind of a takeaway for our chat today, if people wanted to explore homeschooling more, what would be like the first couple steps?
Well, I love a good Google search. And then also, there's usually like a gatekeeper that you might know. Somebody you might know who's over here doing their own thing. And just reaching out to them and asking questions. Finding some, like, I love a good podcast or a good book. So yeah, like your starting point is really going to be, where do you feel comfortable and where do you feel pulled to explore? And then I think the part that you also want to manage is not putting this should on yourself of, I should be doing something different. Because if right now, if it doesn't work for you, then no pressure on yourself to pursue something that's not working. And as entrepreneurs, I think we're really good at that. We know when to make a move and when to hold back and just watch for a while. So I think entrepreneurs are well prepped for exploring an educational alternative within their families. And yeah, I think I personally like accessing, like whenever I have a problem, I like to sort of access my network of people and see, what would work, what doesn't work. And so I love a good Google search, reaching out to my community that I already know, and then just like slowly on my own time, exploring a new idea in ways that feel safe to me. So that's what I would recommend to other folks who are curious.
Amazing.
That's amazing. I like what you saying there about changing the words in your mind, because I was saying to myself all the time, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, I should be doing this, and I just changed that one word from should to could, and instantly my stress levels have gone through the roof to non-existent, because it's like, well, I could do that, but it's not a priority, it's not within my values. It was just a very simple trick to just changing the dialogue in my own head, because I was telling myself I should do this, but that change in dialogue. And I think, well, hopefully that will help a few people with thinking, I could do unschooling. Don't feel pressured from this episode to say, I should be unschooling my children, because that's what all the entrepreneurs should be doing. But it's interesting as well, because I remember very, very well a story of a very successful entrepreneur I know, Daniel Priestley, and he shared a story about how he was going to entrepreneurial school, and he was like really, really excited to be at entrepreneurial school. He spoke to the lecturer after the lecture, and he says, "Oh, how many businesses have you owned, and how many businesses have you run?" Like really, really excited. And the person who was at the front of the class said, "Oh, I've run like one business." "Oh, wow. What was the turnover?" "Oh, about $5,000. He says it was just a hobby. And all of a sudden he had this switch in mindset. He quit entrepreneurial school, effectively unschooled himself, but in the entrepreneurial way, to then launch his own business. And I think there's a powerful story in that. It definitely impacted on me, because I started to feel like that was when my first interest of entrepreneurialism, unschooling, doing things slightly different.
Yeah, I think it's about like accessing that freedom for ourselves to pursue something different, to pursue something that makes sense for us. And then once you've kind of tried that on for yourself, then naturally you want to give it to your kids also.
Yeah.
And that might mean actually homeschooling or unschooling, or it might mean helping them have that mindset as they navigate life through school. But I think the key is to find ways to sort of free our minds so that we're living the life that we want to live. And like that, Amen. I think people go into their own business and pursue this life in general, right?
Amazing.
That is absolutely amazing. I think we could talk all day.
I know.
and I'm conscious that we're at 45 minutes already. So we've covered the one piece, didn't we? Really, you were saying do a Google search, look into how can people contact you?
Oh, well, I tend to be more active on Facebook, or not Facebook, sorry, Instagram, and my handle is at MetaMentoring. And yeah, I'm also on Facebook, same handle. My kids are getting really loud. I hope you can hear me over their play. And yeah, website is www.metamentoring.ca. So yeah, I'd love to see new people. I love meeting new people. And
I follow Erin on Instagram, and she has really good content.
Thanks.
It's definitely a good channel.
Thanks, Sarah.
Fantastic. I'll speak on behalf of myself and say we're really happy to have you on today, Erin, and we really appreciate all the energy that you've brought and how honest and committed you are to helping others as well, which is absolutely fantastic. The Parentpreneur CEO was designed to break the mold. So as you can see, Unschooling kind of fits with that very, very well. It's a mentality that we choose to allow in. It means kind of putting aside like all of those doubts, all of those fears and excuses, for want of a better word. So something Tara and I believe very, very strongly is that we are stronger together. So community is so important to us. So thank you for everyone for listening. Have an amazing day. Thank you, Erin. And I look forward to having a chat offline. So anyway, speak to you later. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.